study of how the brain interprets and reacts to information is deeply intertwined with the fields of electrophysiology, neuromodulation, and the identification of biomarkers. Together, these areas form a foundation for understanding how signals travel through the nervous system, how they are modulated, and how external data such as chemical plumes or biomarkers can be detected using sensors that translate frequency information into sine wave patterns. As science continues to bridge the gap between biological systems and advanced technology, the application of this knowledge allows us to build sensors and interpret complex data through wave analysis. This process connects the behavior of biological responses to the structure of oscillatory patterns, opening up new frontiers in detection, diagnostics, and even environmental surveillance. In the natural world, every signal generated by the nervous system has a wave-like character. For the action potentials traveling through neurons to the oscillations of the brain rhythms observed in critical activity, the nervous system relies heavily on time-based changes in voltage to carry the process information. The fundamental electronic or electrical signal, the action potential, can be observed using electrophysiological techniques that measure the voltage across cell membranes. When multiple neurons fire in synchrony, the result is a coordinated frequency pattern that contributes to a detectable signal such as a brainwave. This principle of signal coordination becomes essential when trying to replicate similar sensing mechanisms in artificial systems. Whether measuring a biomarker in the bloodstream or tracking airborne chemical plumes, modern sensors rely on similar principles of signaling processing and frequency modulation to interpret environmental information. Chemical plumes refer to collections of airborne molecules that disperse in the atmosphere due to turbulence, wind, temperature gradients, or other environmental factors. These plumes can originate from a variety of sources such as industrial facilities, natural gas leaks, or biological emissions. In order to detect and track these chemical signatures, specialized sensors are employed that are capable of identifying trace elements or compounds by analyzing their interaction with the medium surrounding the detector. When molecules from the plume come into contact with the sensor, they can generate a change in electrical properties such as resistance, capacitance, or charge distribution. This subtle shift in the sensor's state is then translated into a voltage signal, which is further processed and modulated into a waveform that can be interpreted for analysis. The key to making these readings meaningful lies in the way the data is transformed into a recognizable waveform, such as a sine wave. A sine wave is a smooth, periodic oscillation that represents a fundamental building block of all wave-based signals. To turn raw sensor data into a sine wave, the frequency content of the signal must first be extracted. Sensors are designed to react to specific chemical interactions at a defined frequency threshold, often in the range of kilohertz to megahertz, depending on the application. These interactions cause the output signal to oscillate at a corresponding frequency. This oscillation can be mapped in terms of amplitude and phase, producing a sinusoidal curve that represents the intensity and timing of the chemical presence. In signal processing, the process of modulation involves charging one or more properties of a carrier wave to encode the information of the input signal. Modulation can occur in various forms, including amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and phase modulation. When detecting chemical plumes or biomarkers, sensors use a modulated carrier wave to track the changes caused by the chemical interaction. For instance, if the presence of a particular gas causes a slight shift in the dielectric constant of a sensing material, this can be converted into a variation in frequency. That variation can then be imposed on a sine wave carrier through frequency modulation, allowing a detailed waveform representation of the plume's presence and strength. Once the modulation signal is captured, it must be interpreted using software or circuitry that can be reconstructed, or that can reconstruct the original environmental signal. This is typically done using a Fourier transform, which decomposes the wave into its constituent frequencies. The resulting frequency spectrum shows which chemicals are present and in what quantities, based on known frequency signatures associated with each compound. These signatures act like fingerprints, allowing identification and qualification. The entire process, from chemical contact to signal generation to waveform modulation, results in a clear and actionable understanding of the environment. Biomarkers serve a similar role in the context of biological monitoring. A biomarker is a measurable substance in an organism whose presence is indicative of some phenomena, such as disease, inflammation, or exposure to toxins. Biomarkers can exist as protein, peptides, metabolites, or nucleic acids, and their detection often relies on similar principles of sensor technology and signal modulation. Biosensors designed to detect biomarkers usually rely on an interaction between the biomarker and a surface receptor. This interaction leads to an electric or optical change in the system, which is then captured and modulated into a measurable signal. Just like with chemical plumes, this signal is often represented as a waveform, allowing clinicians or researchers to evaluate health conditions or physiological states in real time. To enhance the accuracy of detecting such biomarkers, these sensors may incorporate resonant frequency elements such as piezoelectric crystals or microelectromechanical systems. When a biomarker binds to the surface, it adds mass or alters surface tensions, thereby changing the resonant frequency of the sensor. This frequency shift is picked up and encoded into a sinusoidal signal that is then analyzed in terms of amplitude and frequency modulation. This process enables a highly sensitive readout capable of detecting minute biological events. These frequencies are typically very specific, often in the range of tens to hundreds of kilohertz, depending on the nature of the biological material being examined. The structure of the resulting waveform contains a wealth of information. A sine wave that changes in amplitude may suggest the concentration of the biomarker is rising or falling. A phase shift might suggest that the response time of the interaction has changed due to temperature or pH conditions. The interpretation of these sine wave patterns enables researchers to infer underlying biological conditions that might otherwise be invisible to the naked eye. One of the most interesting applications of this science lies in the creation of synthetic neural circuits or artificial detection systems that mimic the properties of the brain. Just as the nervous system adapts and modulates input through neuromodulators and long-term synaptic changes, modern sensing systems are beginning to adapt to changing input using artificial intelligence and learning algorithms. These systems track not only the presence of specific waveforms, but also their evolving patterns.